a map of methane in air, right? The concentration is where we're at right now is about, what, about 1.82 maybe ppm. Where I'm living now, it's more like 1.7. I thought my machine was sort of weird when I was like, oh wait, no, I'm in the southern hemisphere now. Right, yeah, so look how high it is, almost 2 ppm in the industrialized parts of the world. So what is methane? CH4, sorry? Oh yeah, probably the Congo or something. I don't know, or maybe it's, I don't know. I really know very little about Africa. That's embarrassing. Sorry, okay, so it's CH4 or natural gas. Where is it from? Microbes. All right, microbes. Why do we care? It's a super strong greenhouse gas, right? It's 25 times more warming potential than CO2, and it's increasing in the atmosphere. Where else is it from? Not just microbes. Okay, that was a little bit of an oversight on my part. Cow farts, okay. Fossil fuel combustion. A lot from fossil fuel combustion, land use change, paddy, rice agriculture, livestock, right? And so, but some of those boiled back down to microbes, right, except fossil fuel combustion. Good, and so we care, right? And so here's a kind of simplified diagram of the soil methane cycle. I care because soils can take up methane or they can release methane, okay? It's kind of cool. It goes both ways. We're not going to rush. We're just going to go through at a nice, efficient pace here. Turns out that most soils are actually methane sinks. We have methane oxidation going on. Most soils are aerobic. So we have these methanotrophs, these bugs that basically eat the methane because it's got really high energy in those bonds, right? It's a highly reduced compound. Wetlands, however, are methane sources, okay? And there's methanogens, other microbes that can do fermentation. They take acetate or other simple carbon compounds and they ferment them and they produce methane and CO2, okay? And that is released from the soil if there's more methanogens than methanotrophs. So one cool thing about soils is that there's actually everything is everywhere, and you could have anaerobic microcytes that are producing methane, but then as it's leaking back out, it gets consumed by the methanotrophs. So it's this whole kind of, not symbiotic, but this whole network of microbes that we can learn more about by doing, guess what, stable isotope probing. And yes, of course, people are doing that. So here's some simplified C13 fractionations in methane biogeochemistry. Let's just pretend we're in a place where we've got a C3 organic matter source. And just as a reminder, respiration of the CO2 in an aerobic situation is not really going to fractionate that. It's going to be at steady state. The soil CO2, however, is going to be about 4 per mil enriched because of that kinetic fractionation factor. This is in the oxic zone, and the methane is going to be oxidized. And if the methane in the anoxic zone is being produced by methanogenesis, by this hydrogenotrophy process, what a crazy thing, thinking that things can eat hydrogen. Wow, cool. Yeah, so that's one pathway. It leads to like maybe an 80 per mil. Okay, it leads to methane with a minus 80 per mil signature or so. Methanogenesis from acetate fermentation, which is the sort of more common pathway in soils, it leads to methane with a minus 60 per mil delta C13 value. Okay, so we have some differences. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details of the processes. Instead, let's just talk about fracking. What's fracking? Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. Processes. Okay.
The methane oxidation, did you say if there was a fractionation?
Sorry, right. Yeah, thanks. So methane oxidation tends to drive the isotopic composition of methane towards a more enriched state. Right. Thanks for that question, for slowing me down there. Right. So the methane that's produced is really, really, really depleted, really negative. The methane, as it gets oxidized, the methane that's remaining becomes more enriched. Yeah.
You have
Oh, I'm sure that there's methanogenesis in mangrove areas, and where you have vegetation that has roots in the water, it can actually the methane can actually, especially if there's parenchyma, it can actually channel the methane up and release a lot of methane, right? Because it bypasses that oxic zone, bypasses the methanotrophs. Yeah, in a lot of different, like in tundra, a lot of ecosystems that happens.
The example about the paddy rice.
The paddy rice, and that could also be one reason that the paddy rice emits so much methane, but it's also flooded. There is not much of an oxic zone. So I don't know that much about rice. Yeah.
Is there like a number for the methane oxidation?
It just tends to get more enriched, right? And so actually, see how I did these clouds? That's a hint, right? There's sort of a range, right? And so we'll look at that in a minute, right? And so the methane oxidation just pushes it more towards the enriched side. Okay, cool. So let's just talk about fracking for a minute. You guys have heard of fracking, right? Explain it. What is it? What's going on? Here's a kind of a cool picture. What are they doing?
They're drilling down to identify the oil or gas reserve, usually in conjunction, and then they send a bomb essentially down to frack. No, it's not a joke. It's real.
Yeah,
To fracture the geology around it. And
To
then
fracture the seams, right?
And then they send down usually various things like water or whatever to create a pump to extract.
And then it's basically, and the methane comes out of solution. It's somehow released. It can be in solution. It comes out of solution, and it kind of, then they can extract it in the gas well that's associated with the fracking well, right? There's a well that drives water or some sort of fracking solution, that compounds of which we don't really know, and it sends it down there, and then it drives the methane from the coal seams. A lot of the time it's a coal seam, and then they can extract it out. Anyone else study this or know more details?
The fluid too, they don't, it's a proprietary thing, but a lot of it also has like beads in it to fill the space with it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what's going in these fracking solutions is not necessarily known exactly, but yeah, it's quite a large industry in developing these types of things.
I think the advantage with fracking is that it goes horizontal. It's able to go that way and then that way, so they can frack along the entire shale layer.
With just one drill?
Exactly. They're doing horizontal drilling now, right? And so that's something that they can extract more natural gas out of these seams that do, in most of these extraction areas, go horizontally. Yeah, good. And so it's a much more efficient way to get the natural gas out, and this is largely why natural gas prices have been going down, right? And this is why coal is going out of business, right? Okay, and so it's not a bad thing that coal is going out of business, right? Okay, so I mean, we've got a bunch of kind of evils. Is it the lesser of two evils? Okay, well, what the frack? I couldn't get the speakers to work.
Was that intentional? Oh, that's crazy. Was that on boat?
Sometimes a picture
Is he inside?
yes, the Condamine River in southwest Queensland on fire. The fracking just a kilometre away.
A kilometre away.
Methane coming up, and now the river is alight. Unbelievable. The most incredible thing I've seen, a tragedy in the Murray-Darling Basin. This is the future of Australia. If we do not stop the frackers who want to spread across all states and territories and do this to your community, to your environment, this is utterly unacceptable. It's been brought to you by Labor, Liberal and National parties who back the dirty frackers. Only the Greens think this is bloody crazy.
All right. So you can tell this guy's a politician, right? He's a Greens senator, right? So from Queensland, right? So it's a political situation, right? I mean, energy and climate change, it's all political, right? It's like we can't get away from it. But however, you know, we can certainly do our best to get good data and to study and understand good data. I just have a couple more minutes of this really cool study that was done. It was published in 2011, and I'll get to that after this. So we can learn a lot about methane and the dangers or not dangers of fracking, safety of fracking, by studying stable isotopes. Right, so this is a kind of a diagram showing how the delta C13 of methane and the delta D of methane can be correlated. Be careful of your axes, right? I don't know why someone decides to plot like depletion going upwards, but anyway. So here's what we were just saying, the methyl type fermentation is like acetate fermentation, that's around -60. Carbonate reduction, also known as hydrogenotrophy, is -80-ish. And then thermogenic, geothermal, hydrothermal, and this thermogenic, I probably have some words on here. Okay, the thermogenic methane becomes enriched during the production of methane in coal seams. Okay, so as methane is being preserved in coal seams, this happens with other compounds too, it becomes enriched, okay? And so it can go much more positive, less negative, than in the production in soils. And so this is this paper where this group out of Rob Jackson's lab did a study using delta C13 and a whole lot of other geochemical proxies to try to understand what was happening with the Marcellus Shale formation in Pennsylvania. And they went to a whole lot of people's homes that had wells, and they got water samples out of the wells, right, out of their taps. And, and here's a nice plot of the delta, and so here's the delta C13 on the x-axis, the concentration of methane in the well water on the y-axis. Microbial methanogenesis is, you know, maybe -60 to -80. Thermogenic methane is maybe -20 to -50. And does the methane isotope, the delta C13 of methane alone, show you the difference between the non-fracking areas and the fracking areas? Not so much, right? There's really quite a lot of overlap. There's like maybe 20, at least 20 per mil of overlap in the signals. Right, and I'll have you guys look at that paper if you're interested in this stuff. I admit I'm racing a little bit. Another thing, so they looked at the methane concentration, and they were able to see really high concentrations in the water from the areas where there was fracking within 1 kilometer. And in fact, some of those, anything over 10, I think is considered to be something that needs to be mitigated. Anything over 50 is like explosive hazard. Right, and so these are people's drinking water wells. Yeah.
So the portions that you circle that are fracking, there's no fracking. The no fracking can still have thermogenic sources as well. What you're getting after.
And so is it thermogenic, or is it just like being pushed more enriched by methane oxidation?
And could, since a mixing model can use concentrations, is that how you get it?
Right, okay, so we can do mixing model with the concentration and the isotopic composition, and on the next slide I have a couple more clues that might have been the other question, right? And so this is another plot that is also still not completely a final answer, but here they have the ratio of methane concentration to higher chain hydrocarbons, and note the logarithmic scale. So ethane is what? What's ethane? C2H6, right? So it's just a two carbon hydrocarbon. And so that ratio is higher in, so there's very few, why is that negative? I think this y-axis is upside down. It should be higher. Oh, that's really interesting. I never noticed that. So there's ethane and propane and butane associated with thermogenic natural gas. Bless you. Okay, and so they're using the other types of hydrocarbons along with this study. They're also using the delta D of methane, which, if it's produced by microbes, it is the hydrogen isotopes are kind of are correlated with the water, the delta D in the water of that area. And so there's a number of different geochemical tools that we can use to try to understand these and try to pick apart these environmental problems. Of course, this was a really challenging paper for this postdoc to get published, right? It was quite controversial. And so they actually did it's a PNAS paper, and if you're interested in this sort of stuff, I really recommend taking a look at it, because they've got a massive supplement section showing the radium, all the salts that they measured. They measured so many different things. They measured so many different things to try to really help demonstrate that actually probably the methane in the fracking areas could be getting into the well water. But they also demonstrated that the brines and the fracking fluids were probably not getting into the well waters. Okay, and so this is really good science, rigorous science, using stable isotopes that's trying to help solve some really important environmental problems. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Soils are awesome. We have to simplify our systems in order to really start understanding the processes that are going on. Of course, isotopes are useful, but don't apply isotopes in isolation. All right, use a lot of more data types and data sources to try to understand and interpret your results. Okay, that's it. Coffee.